Greetings, diners, and welcome to another edition of the Collapse Cafe. Except this time it's a special edition, and it's called the Ari and Steve Collapse Update, after the weekend update that used to be done on Saturday Night Live with Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd, as I recall. At any rate, this show here today is by special request of some of the fans out there who wanted to hear just Steve and myself contemplate the stories of the collapse day, as it were, for the week. And after talking a little bit before the show, we determined that we will not talk about oil prices this time. We probably talked about oil prices and that business in the financial markets in at least 4 of the last 5 of these shows. So we're going to go off into a little bit different territory today that we don't cover so much, or haven't covered so much in the past. Talk a little bit about politics and the political hoopla of the day is the Donald Trump, who has taken the Republican Party by storm and has the various members of that party scurrying about, all worried. Steve, you got some thoughts on Donald?
Well, he's certainly a phenomenon. I mean, he's such a phenomenon. I think I want to get a hairpiece, or I've got to do something so that my hair, which is kind of non-existent, has that kind of swooping type of thing. I don't know if it's possible, but it's Donald is just nobody predicted he was going to do anything. It's just kind of like a vanity project for him, and he just taking the whole Republican Party and turn it upside down, and nobody really knows what to do. The ordinary, what I call the ordinary run-of-the-mill Republicans, some of them are horrified, but obviously he's having his way in the primary elections, and he's really doing well. And none of the other, brand X candidates that the Republicans have been able to put forward, it's not gotten any traction at all. And so the next thing you have to ask yourself is, what does this represent? Is there a fundamental change? What's it going to mean for the Republican Party? Can Donald Trump actually win the general election? And how deep and wide is his popularity? And what is it really all about?
The analysis, for the most part, is that it's a protest vote. People are fed up with the normal political candidates and the business as usual, and they're looking to shake things up. And I think he's also tapped into the same nerve that a lot of the other xenophobic type of candidates over in Europe have touched into on the immigration question. That is very much in people's consciousness these days, and so I think that's driving a lot of the vote. And of course, there's just the shallow nature of the electorate in general. Donald is somebody that's been in the news for most of his career in life, going back for me, at least as far as my college years. I remember stories about the Donald and his wife, or I don't even remember her name, but he's had a lot of celebrity, and if you have that name and that celebrity, and on top of that $1 billion or so of debt money, then that automatically makes you legitimate in the eyes of the voting population. So I think that's a lot of the reason for it. And of course, there's just his outrageous speaking style. The fact that he will say such amazingly outrageous statements. I think we were talking about this before, how he's kind of like the blowhard at the bar, spouting off on one topic or another. The main difference between him and the typical New York blowhard is that he has $1 billion. So, but as far as the regular establishment goes, and Republican establishment, I mean, they're now talking about Mitt Romney dropping in there. They're talking about a contested Republican convention, and the possibility also that the run-of-the-mill Republicans might go ahead and split off, run somebody like Romney on a third-party ticket, and get this whole thing thrown into the House of Representatives with nobody gaining enough shares of the general election to actually win. What do you think about that possibility, Steve?
Well,
that this could be thrown into the House?
Trump is popular with the Republicans in the primaries. First of all, you've got independents and even Democrats switching over to the Republican side. They can vote for Trump, and it doesn't really cost them anything. And by voting for Trump, they're undermining the preordained candidate was Jeb Bush. Bush had everything lined up in advance, and all the big money, the media, the endorsements, all the Republican big shots and the donors, everything was set. He has the right last name. Everything was going to be set up for him as a coronation. He was just going to walk right in and become the president, or at least a candidate, a viable candidate. So it turns out to be, just basically a plain vanilla kind of individual. Doesn't really get anybody fired up, which is, you don't have that problem with Donald. The thing about Donald, he's a TV personality, and that kind of gives him the same kind of status as Ronald Reagan, who was, another spokesman, a spokesperson on television, and an actor. He's at ease in front of the camera, and then the whole thing about the media and the interaction with the, people by way of the, whether it's the movies or television and whatnot. That's becomes the subject rather than the individual himself. You got this kind of image on the screen. You can kind of project your various and sundry desires. Pretty much anything you want. So Trump is kind of playing into that too, because he's not really specific about anything except for building the wall. Building the wall probably isn't going to happen. Even if he's elected. And basically, nobody really knows what he stands for on this stuff, or whether he got any way of actually turning his policies into, some, concrete changes. So, he's kind of playing up this business of being a kind of like a outline that other people can kind of draw in whatever they want.
Well, one of the policies that I read, and like all the rest of the stuff that he's pitched out, it's not very well fleshed out in any way. He kind of just throws these things out off the cuff. But was that he, because he doesn't like the fact that so many jobs have been offshored to Mexico and China over the years. That's been a big bugaboo of his going, way back. I think somebody put up a video from Oprah Winfrey from like 1985 or something like that, where he was bitching about that. And the solution that I read was that he's going to drop a 35 to 45% tariff on goods imported from places like China and Mexico that provide cheap labor to make all these products, and essentially make America's manufacturing base great again by preventing all this cheap merchandise from flowing in. What do you think? First of all, is it plausible that he could even get such a tariff dropped on? And if he did, would that make any difference as far as American manufacturing is concerned?
Well, see, here's the problem. I mean, that horse already ran out of the barn a long time ago, because, what America exports today, or at least it has been up until very recently, is credit. That's what we manufacture. Credit costs almost nothing to make. You have some guy sitting at a computer and, with his fingers, adding zeros onto one or two, whatever number you like, and he send it overseas. And once it gets out of the hands of the first borrower, then it becomes money. So we're exporting money all over the world, trillions of dollars, that doesn't cost anything, that can be made in limitless supply, that people will kill each other to get. So, the business of, importing television sets rather than making them here, or refrigerators or whatever, it's kind of like beside the point. What really matters is whether we can continue to export credit to the rest of the world. And, the short answer to that is well, we did it for a while, but there's so much credit in the world that nobody can pay it back. So now we got a problem of how to deal with the dollar credit that they can't, can't be retired and may not be serviceable. So, that's something that Donald doesn't really understand. And, I saw the Oprah Winfrey interview, and basically kind of got off on the wrong foot. It says the United States is a debt. We're creditors to the rest of the world. We provide credit to everybody who uses dollars, and that's just about everybody in every country. So, anything that kind of disturbs that is going to cause a big problem, a lot more so than exported jobs. And
well, the jobs aspect, though, is something that plays to the audience, and as this has been a long time complaint about America, that it has become a service economy with low-paid jobs, bartending jobs, barista jobs at Starbucks, that sort of business, and that for the average Joe six-pack, there really aren't good high-paying jobs anymore. The legend goes that the good high-paying jobs were in the automotive manufacturing business, but of course those were in the days when the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and other unions still had some power and some ability to negotiate wages, but that's all been arbitraged out over the years. So it's the fact that most people don't have good jobs. There's a very small sliver of people in managerial type jobs and in professions and so forth that still make a good living, but most Americans have seen a huge wage decrease over these last 20, 30 years.
Of course. But,
that's what it's playing to.
Well, that's what, obviously that's why, Trump and anybody that has that kind of, campaign rhetoric, is certainly he's offering something that he can't deliver, though. He could make work jobs. Like Roosevelt had a civilian conservation corps. And I think he hired 5 million people, had them planting trees, which is, not a bad idea, but it's not the kind of jobs that Donald Trump is talking about. He wants to bring back manufacturing jobs, high-paying manufacturing jobs. And, there really isn't, the kind of industrial demand. Those jobs were not. They didn't employ the whole country. The heyday of the auto industry was really in the 1920s, and labor was fairly low paid. Most people in the 1920s in America and Europe worked on farms. It was more or less probably 50-50 agrarian versus industrial. So, some of the industrial people did pretty well, and others were a little better than serfs. They made, a few cents an hour, and, they worked like dogs. And if they got hurt or there something happened and they were fired, they were replaced by somebody else. And that's when you had the, waves of immigrants and all that taking factory jobs in big cities. So, after the World War II, you had a strange situation because Germany, England, France, Japan, were ruined. They were pretty much either bankrupt or destroyed, and the Soviet Union it's spent all of its energies on beating Nazi Germany. So America was really the only country that had an industrial base that could make consumer goods. So we pretty much had a free field. We had the whole world market for at least 5 years, maybe longer, and then during the 1950s, still on a lot of specialty type goods, the United States had almost a monopoly. For instance, you want to buy an automobile in 1950, you pretty much bought an American car. That was really all you had. So it wasn't toward 1960, then you started getting other competition from other countries. So that was an interval of time from, the 1940s to the 50s, where you had, industrial, dominance by the United States, and, the union were very strong, and, workers got all these things that took their parents and their grandparents, they shed blood in order to get things like 40-hour week and double time and a half overtime, paid vacations, and, be treated like human beings on the job. So, but, that can't last long, because, the big problem with industrialization is it doesn't pay for itself. So, you have to come up with the credit. If you're a business, your industry expands, and you have to have more and more credit all the time. So we found that there was more money into credit creation than there is into manufacturing. You get manufacturing in, any number of third world countries, and that's obviously what we've done. But the money is in the credit side. And the thing that's ironic about the whole thing with Donald Trump is that all his money has come from the credit side too. I mean, he hasn't manufactured anything in his life. In fact, he's never worked a day in his life. He doesn't know what end of a hammer to pick up. And
Yeah, well, all
the working people
casinos went bankrupt, so he created casinos, whatever. That whole idea of what's productive and so forth. People look out at things and call
casinos are entertainment, man.
but exactly what is it that they have produced? Mainly, as we said before, they produced waste. Just about everything that gets produced or has been produced by the Industrial Revolution over some period of time ends up in landfill. So another aspect of that era, that so-called golden era of American capitalism between 1950 and 1970 or so, was the fact that we were able to power it with oil that was here on our own home soil. We didn't have to acquire the oil from overseas. So that energy driver was another aspect of what is, made America great during that period, and what made it possible to have those high-paying jobs.
Right along the same line as our heavy industries, steel, rubber, petroleum, chemical, transportation, all that was powered by anthracite coal. We had the world's largest deposit of high-quality coal, and that pretty much gave us a tremendous advantage, particularly during the war years. And that kind of ran out right after the war. We had to start using lower grades of coal, and so it became less efficient. And that was part of the push to get the railroads from using steam power to oil power, diesel power, because we couldn't really use the high grade coal. We ran out. So that's part of it too. We just had all these resources. They were here on our own shores. We didn't have to import them. That's real.
Yeah, and that aspect of exporting credit has, basically, we sent a lot of that credit over to Saudi Arabia in order to get their oil. And of course, if the credit leaves these shores and goes to other shores, then it's not available for people to use here. So the more of the credit that gets offshored to other places in return for their resources or whatever, the less that's available to use to pay wages and so forth here in the fascist states of America. So as long as you have that resource deficit, and you need those resources, and you're going to do it by some other means rather than stealing it via the military.
That costs too. Yeah,
that costs money too. Absolutely. So you have that problem. All right. Well, let's look at this actual election cycle, though, and the people that Donald is up against. You've got within his own party, the last people standing, I guess, are Ted Cruz and I don't remember the other guy's name. And then Kasich, the governor of Ohio or whatever. And then on the Democratic side, you've got Hillary as the presumptive nominee these days. It doesn't look like the Bernie Sanders movement is going to be able to work any magic on that side of the aisle. What did you think of that particular battle?
Well, it's similar to Trump. I don't understand why black people and I can understand why women would vote for, would support Hillary, without doing a lot of digging or, you kind of hold your nose. But, I don't understand why black people or Hispanics would support Hillary, because basically Hillary's gotten to where she has by, stepping on these guys. And, it's kind of thing like working people, industrial workers, supporting Trump, whose interests are antithetical to theirs. And it's the same thing with Hillary. Hillary's interests are antithetical to everybody except Goldman Sachs and the Wall Street bankers and the people that have given her millions and millions of dollars, basically buying her favor. So, I'm surprised that she's gotten as far as she has. I mean, she's not exactly a likable person, and she's not particularly competent either. I mean, as Secretary of State, she presided over, the situation in Libya. It's turned into a disaster. I don't know how much responsibility she had with Syria, but certainly hasn't done anything to, the responsible thing to do in a place like Syria is kind of like, end of fighting. That's step number one. Let's come up with some kind of a, diplomatic solution. That's what the Secretary of State's supposed to do. But, instead of, arms trafficking and, dealing with militant groups and, trying to, basically cause as much disruption as possible. Of course, I believe that the American strategy is not to be responsible, but to, steal other countries' resource consumption. And you do that by destabilizing them. And, if that really is exactly what the American strategy is, then Hillary's a part of it, and she's doing a great job.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
why it's a very cynical approach to doing things.
Well, that's why it's called the Empire of Chaos, and that is basically what we're exporting all over the world is chaos, making all of these various countries into failed states, and it's happening one after the other. Every place we touch turns to shit.
Exactly.
It's the reverse Midas touch.
Well, I mean, it could be why oil prices are low too, but let's not talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the more demand you crush, the more that's left over for happy motoring here, as they say. So, and then Bernie Sanders phenomenon. Do you think that the fact that he's got the socialist label on him is part of the reason that he's not made up enough ground against Hillary, or is the socialist label actually good and the reason that he was able to get as far as he did? That makes him a kind of anti-establishment candidate as well, like Donald. Again, a lot of people said that a vote for Bernie was a protest type of vote against business as usual. How do you think the population at large is looking at the question of socialism these days, and whether we need more of it, less of it, more government, less government, etc.?
Well, it's really hard to say. I speaking personally, socialism doesn't bother me. It's just a descriptor, and it's like capitalism. All countries are socialist. They have to be. They got central banks. They have credit money system. Everything in your pocket is some unpaid debt by somebody else, and it's run by the government. So it's socialistic from the ground up. And I think the label doesn't help Sanders. I think he kind of figured it was a way he could identify himself, separate himself from the rest of the other candidates. There was a lot of, Democratic candidates, not as many as the Republican side. But, I think it carried the idea, it really doesn't. In a way, some of it's really logical. There's some things that would really help this country, I think, if we didn't, weren't caught up in the business of, allowing private sector cartels to, control everything. But, you know, once you start opposing that, then it's the big business interests that are really your opposition. So, you know, the real division is not so much in the ground. I think a lot of young people really like Bernie Sanders a lot, but the establishment definitely is in Hillary Clinton. You know, she's the one that, you know, makes all the deals with all these people. You know, you talk about a deal maker, and Hillary is the deal maker. She makes Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. Hillary basically has stolen all of the things that she has right now. She's done it all by herself. So, you know.
Yeah, I think both.
You got to give her a little bit of credit. You know, Bernie's too honest, really, to be a politician.
You know, both of the Clintons, you know, got themselves well connected very early on in their careers and have been hobnobbing with the elite, the Bilderberg crowd, and so forth. I remember seeing a recent picture of Chelsea Clinton, the next generation of Clintons, at Bilderberg. And so, you know, it's that whole crowd that has been in charge behind the scenes here for you know, certainly the whole post-war period, and you know, through agencies like the BIS, Bank for International Settlements, and the court at The Hague, and you know, now we have this the TPP agreement, Trans-Pacific Partnership. This whole crowd of people that has been pushing for a globalist type of economy and one world government. Where do you think they're going? The globalists. Do you think they're going to, you know, be able to maintain their hegemony over the globe, their hegemony over monetary policy and credit creation and all of those things, or is that going to slip from their grasp at some point?
Well, yeah, I never really thought they had. I think they thought they have more influence than they actually have. But you know, I mean, the whole thing is slipping away. You know, we're in a kind of a, you know, Larry Summers called it, you know, secular stagnation. But you know, it's all basically deflation. We've had a long period of credit expansion. Everybody feels good with, you know, more money, and there's more business, and there's more opportunities, and there's more opportunities to steal. You know, the cronyism expands, it multiplies itself, and it becomes, you know, everybody starts believing their own propaganda. But it lasts up to the point where, you know, your total borrowing capacity becomes, you just use it to service your debts. And then you got a problem because somebody defaults and it causes a cascade. You know, you have inflation and you have deflation, or you're rolling over in deflation. You know, the winds of deflation are at everybody's back. We're in a now very long era of less, and we haven't come to terms with it yet. So none of the people in charge, whether they're you know, these supranational organizations, whether they're the United States government or the Eurozone, or the Chinese, you know, they all are clinging to something that is obsolete. And, you know, what I tell people, you know, particularly about Hillary, because I think Hillary's going to wind up being the president. Her presidency is going to fail before she even takes the oath of office. And it's just going to be a matter of how she gets destroyed by the force of events that's overtaking the United States right now. And it doesn't matter whether it's Hillary or Trump or anybody else. They're all going to wind up in the same boat, because the forces that are involved are the things that nobody talks about. I mean, I have not heard Trump or Hillary or any of the other candidates talk about natural resources. And maybe they'll make a remark about how much of a hoax that climate change is. But that's as far as it goes. They just simply don't have a grasp of what's happening right now, right underneath their feet. And it's going to, you know, beat them upside the head. I mean, it already is. I mean, the reason we're having problems in the country right now is because of the resource shortages, resource depletion, and the costs that are associated with this that we can't meet at all. And we got central banks trying to, you know, inventing credit. And you got the media is lying, you know, out of every hole in itself. You've got the denial on the part of the big shots, and none of it's really working. And you know, it renders all of these things. You know, it's you mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, it's not going to work. You know, even if it's ratified by all the countries involved, it's not going to accomplish anything because, you know, when you're broke, you can't spend the money. And when you're broke, the companies involved default. They go into bankruptcy or they're turned into zombies. They like, you know, Japanese companies, and I think the Chinese companies are in the process of becoming, you know, zombies. And they really, they have a good appearance. They have a nice building somewhere, and that's about it. So,
well, you know, that zombification of the corporations, various different types of companies, that also is dependent on, you know, a consistent flow of credit. It's like all of the, you know, the fracking companies here in the FS of A that are, you know, totally insolvent, and not just, it's not just a liquidity problem, yet they continue to exist because by some magic they still have enough access to credit in order to be able to keep going. You know, and they downsize their workforce and so forth and shrink themselves. And then there's all this talk about, you know, we have, you know, people on the diner who say that, you know, well, you know, the oil industry, if the gas industry is going to come back, we'll pick up all these assets for pennies on the dollar, and, you know, we'll come roaring back to life. And there really isn't a resource problem. There's plenty of energy left in the ground, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This, you know, when you talk about the politicians being clueless about it, well, part of the reason that they're clueless about it is because they're constantly sold the completely opposite spin from the people who run these industries. And they are looked at as the world-class experts, if you will, and they know what's going on here. But
well,
know,
I think, you know, they have to.
If you're getting garbage in, you're going to have garbage out, right? And
right. What else are they going to do? You know, let's just say for a minute they decide they're going to start dealing with the problem seriously. Well, the first thing they have to admit is, well, we really have a structural shortage, and we got to deal with it. So we're going to deal with it we're going to use a lot less. So right off the bat, you know, you shut down a lot of big businesses. You know, of course, transportation is like basically that's what we were all about. Is, you know, getting our butts from point A to point B back again. You know, we just repeat the process over and over and over again like idiots. But you know, people make money off of that. So you know, you've got a problem, and we haven't really figured it out because it's a lot easier for everybody to lie to themselves about how great everything's going to be tomorrow rather than to face the harsh truth and say, well, we got to come up with an alternative. And, you know, we probably should have come up with an alternative 30 or 40 years ago, but, you know, it's a little late in the game now. So, you know, it's really, it's instead of being annoying, it's like terrifying. So, you know, the industry and the media and establishment, they're all comforting each other because they really don't have any choice at this point. You know, if they don't keep the line going to the bitter end, and it's too horrible for these people to contemplate. You know, it's just if you're realistic, it's horrible for everybody. I mean, it's like try to imagine what it'd be like. You know, if you can't, you know, how do you get around if you don't have fuel? If you can't drive your car, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you can't get anywhere because the closest, you know, whatever it is you have to go to is 15 miles away. I mean, it takes a day to walk 15 miles.
Well, there are bicycles. You can do
nobody
miles an hour on a bicycle. But well, you also have another class of you know, snake oil salesmen like Elon Musk that are selling people on the idea that we can transition over to EVs. That okay, yeah, you know, maybe the oil will run out, but we'll run all of these vehicles on electrics, and you know, whether they say it's going to come from nice green renewables or we'll build lots of nuke plants or whatever, they still manufacture the idea that, you know, enough energy can be acquired somehow to keep this type of lifestyle, this type of living going on for in perpetuity, essentially.
Well,
So
Musk is one of these guys. I mean, I hear you. I mean, Musk is one of these. He's a very successful version of Donald Trump. You know, he's subsidized. They're all subsidized. They all get borrowed money from someplace. And Musk gets most of his from Uncle Sam. And I think Trump gets most of his money, borrows it from Deutsche Bank. So somebody should break is going bankrupt. But anyway, Musk gets these subsidies, billions and billions of dollars to do whatever far-fetched project he can think of, as long as it sounds good. And it's got that little science fiction thing going. It's like, we're going to ride in a tube between San Francisco and LA. Who the hell wants to be in a sewer pipe running from? I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, it's just a glorified subway, high-speed subway. And
the subway stops every once in a while. You can get people coming in and going out. That's
yeah. How about ballistic? I'm surprised he hasn't tried that one yet. Firing people from one end of the country out of a sort of big cannon. So yeah, and then he does have a rocket ship venture and so forth. But that myth, there's that myth that technology is going to save us. And, the problem that you identified earlier is really essentially that, beginning in the post-war period, we built out the infrastructure to be entirely dependent upon this easy type of transportation. So with the infrastructure in place as it is, once that ease of movement goes, the society becomes almost unlivable, or really unlivable in full fashion. So the problem is not so much trying to replace cars or whatever. It's the fact that we have to build an entirely new infrastructure. This infrastructure doesn't work once the energy is gone. And where's the resources and the energy coming from to build a new infrastructure? I mean, all the concrete, that all takes energy, all that stuff. Everything that we used to build out here took enormous quantities of energy. And to change it now would also take enormous quantities of energy, which just aren't available.
Well, the thing is, too, RE, because we don't talk about any of this stuff, our presidential candidates are silent about it all. The only way we're going to find out about, how far we are against the wall is when we actually have a crisis and we find it. Yes, we do have a real energy shortage, and we're going to have to cope with it at fairly, stringent means. I mean, sooner or later, we're going to have rationing. I mean, hard rationing, where, you're allowed to get a certain amount of, petroleum or some other energy in a period of time. And, because it's the only way. I mean, right now we ration energy by access to credit. So we're starting to, push people off to the side. They can't get credit anymore, so they can't buy fuel. Okay, fine. All right, eventually the credit system breaks. So you got to come up with some alternative to, allocating the energy resource. And, if the credit system doesn't work, then somebody's got to, act like, boss man and say, well, you get 3 gallons a week. That's it.
Well, as long as here in the FS of A, there's a perceived glut of energy. And right now, it's not just perceived, there is a glut of energy in terms of oil and natural gas relative to the consumption, relative to the demand. So you have all of these oil storage facilities basically topped off now. And, they've got ships sailing around the Atlantic going back and forth because they can't find a port essentially to offload their oil. That as long as we have that perceived glut, I don't, see when or where or how the rationing business begins. How long do you think it's going to be before this glut situation that we're in starts to diminish?
Well, I don't think it's ever, I don't think it's ever really going to. I think there's always going to be more supply at any given moment than there is consumption, and it's because that, if the price go down, they don't go down enough to, lift people out of the state of ruin that they're in. I mean, that's the reason why prices are low in the first place, is because people can't afford it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be people in the United States. The oil market has gone global, so you have the marginal customer can be in Japan or Greece, Portugal, it can be in Argentina, or Russia, or all of the above. So you have these marginal customers excluded from the market because they can't borrow, because wages are borrowed too. So when I say borrow, it means they're not getting paid, and they don't have enough money where they can buy. They might buy some, but they're not buying enough to push the price up from the bottom. And oil business, all the energy business are bottom-up businesses. Every kilowatt hour of electricity is sold to a customer. Every gallon of gasoline or diesel fuel is sold to a customer. It's not something like credit is a business that from billionaire to billionaire. Petroleum business is truly a customer business. It's kind of like ice cream cones. So you have to sell to a customer, and if you don't have as many customers, you're going to have more inventory than you have. Eventually you're going to have more inventory than you have place to put it. And basically this phenomenon isn't limited to petroleum. There's other commodities as well as like other kinds of retail goods. I mean, you have big inventory bills all across the whole spectrum. The economy, you've got different kinds of retail goods. They're stuffing warehouses. You got automobile. They're over manufactured automobile. They got them. Dealers have got them coming out their ears. You've got just about any kind of capital good. What they call a capital good, which is machinery, like Caterpillar tractors, and excavators, construction equipment, tractor trailers, all this kind of stuff. That there's more inventory than they have customers for. So it's not just gasoline and diesel fuel and crude oil. It's all these other things. It's copper. It's corn. It's all these other kinds of commodities, industrial commodities in particular, coal and iron. Shipping. You think of that as a good. Shipping rates have collapsed because people just aren't buying the stuff. I mean, one reason they're not buying the stuff is they already got everything. It's like I know all these people. They have storage space. I got storage space. I got so much crap. It's like I'm inundated with it, but I'm not alone. I mean, it's like everybody in America is inundated with crap. We don't need any more.
Yeah, I know that situation. Look behind me over here.
You can see it.
Plenty of crap. And I've been talking about taking myself out on the road for doing some photography and some video to chronicle the way collapse is playing itself out.
That's a good idea.
Well, yeah, and since I'm retired now, it's just a question of whether I'm healthy enough to do it. It'd be a fun thing, but the problem is the stuff. I came up here with 5 bags. I was able to come up here with all of my possessions, threw them on a plane, and came here. I didn't have a car at the time or anything like that. And when I traveled in my trucking years, it was very similar. I had everything that I owned in containers, five or six containers and bags, and I would throw them in the truck, and I'd go out in the truck for 3 or 4 months at a time, and be living that way. So I didn't have a whole lot of stuff. Well, over the last 10 years or so, I have kept accumulating more and more preps, more and more things. I said, well, I'm going to really need that when the shit hits the fan. So there's no way I could fit all of this shit into a van. I gotta trim down to just what I really need, and that's the stuff aspect is pretty hard. And it's true. When I go to the store now and look around at things, it's like, I don't need that. I have that. I already have that. I have that. Yeah, I think that buying of stuff, buying of merchandise that was so seductive for people is somewhat losing its charm, although not completely, and so forth. So, all right, I want to go on now and leave the topic of the Donald behind here. and move on to what's going on down in Syria, and with the Russians pulling out there and so forth. And I'm just going to do an aside here, Steve. We can't take a break. We do these things; they run live. I can't pause them, so we have to just keep going until we're done. And so you gotta.
Set my kitchen on fire.
You gotta keep going. I mean, I'd love to go outside and smoke a cigarette right now, take a break, but no, we can't do that.
Okay.
So let's deal with the question of Syria and the Russians, how they're playing the game, and what might happen with the Iranians and all the rest. Where do you think that's going?
Well, the big news, of course, is that Mr. Putin pulled out some of his, military out of Syria. He didn't make any announcements or anything. He said, "Well, we're done here. Our job is done. I'm leaving now. Bye." And which took everybody by surprise. I mean, nobody we have 18 or 17 intelligence agencies in the United States, and I guarantee you, none of them had any inkling that this was going to happen. Just like they had no inkling that the Russians were going to show up in the first place. So it really surprised everybody. But also, kind of like a little bit of news in the background is that apparently Hezbollah, which has been doing, basically been the point of the spear for Assad's military, they're going to withdraw to areas that are just adjacent to their little zone in Lebanon. So it seems to me that the whole business is an interesting juncture because there's a lot of talk, but I don't really think things have changed. I mean, the Russians weren't there really long enough to really do anything. I mean, they killed a lot of civilians and blew up a bunch of schools and hospitals. But, the militant groups are still in business, probably diminished a bit. And, I think the story changed around. But I don't really think that the Russians really accomplished a whole lot because they weren't there long enough. And right now they got Assad kind of twisting in the wind. I'm sure he's losing sleep about what's going to happen next.
Well, I think that from their point of view, or in terms of objectives, what they did was they destroyed supply lines for ISIS, and that then, or Daesh, or whatever you want to call it, and that then allowed Assad's troops and his regular army people to consolidate and begin to make progress outward instead of constantly being pushed inward. And so I think what they did was to try to leave Assad in more of a position of strength than he was when they dropped in there. And he probably is in more of a position of strength now. But the question is, how long can he maintain that position of strength without the Russian air support and all the rest of the stuff that they were dropping on him for him to be able to make that progress outward? And my question to people on the diner who follow this sort of stuff in more detail than I do is, well, now that the bombs aren't dropping from the rescue planes, why can't they just set up their little oil road pipeline to Turkey that they had going before, and get the whole business started over again? I don't see why that whole shtick won't just sort of pop back up like mushrooms. Yeah,
right. I mean, there's nothing really to stop it. I mean, I think that everything's in flux all the time. I mean, Islamic State is not as powerful as it was last year, and I think the big factor there is the decline in oil prices has really put a hurting on them, and it's hurt them more than anybody else, really, because the other sides, they can either act as middlemen, and or they had, like the Syrian government has outside support. The Kurds have outside support from the United States, and probably from the Iranians too. But the Islamic State, their situation is really diminished, and it's. I mean, personally, I think they're going to be defeated this year by the Kurds. But the Russian business has kind of thrown a monkey wrench into that too, because the American support for the Kurds has been kind of tentative. very, probably too cautious. The Americans are too solicitous of the Turkish government, which is, basically going insane right in front of our eyes. So, but the Russians, kind of jump in with both feet and say, well, we'll support you. Well, instead of like one airstrike here and one there, we'll launch 30 of them. We'll just tell us where we want to bomb, and we'll bomb. We'll just destroy everything. So,
yeah, forget smart bombs. We don't need no smart bombs. We'll use the stupid ones, and we'll just carpet bomb the whole place. Yeah,
But what it does is, all that kind of gives the Turks pause because, first of all, the Turks aren't going to do anything in Syria, except some kind of sneaky, backdoor nonsense with proxies. They're not going to do anything in Syria without air supremacy, and they're not going to have that as long as the Russians are there. Because the Russians are pretty much, flatten anything that, the Turks would try to do. So,
the idea or the danger there is that since Turkey is a NATO member, that, if in fact they got into, dogfights and real, air battle going on with the Russians, that it would be, NATO would be required by treaty and so forth to step in and support the Turks.
Well, it's a defense treaty. It's not the Turkey can't launch an offensive into another country and expect NATO to follow in behind them. I think that the bureaucrats and the NATO people would look at this and say, you started this, you finish it yourself.
Right. Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. But Turkey has a lot of, problems just beyond, you talk about it going insane, beyond the that fight that's going on along the Syrian border. I think a bigger issue there is all of the refugees that are flowing into Turkey. People, talk about, the 100,000, 200,000, whatever, people that have made it up to Sweden and Germany and so forth, but there are like 3 million refugees currently in Turkey from various different other countries in the region. And how can you possibly run a decent government when you got this constant influx of impoverished people that are you have to feed, or they turn into terrorists inside your own country, etc. How do you think they can deal with that level of migration that's going on now? Not just the Turks, but that problem also obviously spills over to Europe, and Greece has become almost another de facto concentration camp of refugees because they blocked up the Macedonian border. So where do you see that one going?
Well, it's a big mess. It's going to get worse. I mean, this is just like the beginning of migration. And, everybody's been really irresponsible about it. I mean, if everybody kind of thought about this in the beginning before the whole business started, say around 2010, and say, look, this is what we got to do. The first thing we have to do is absolutely important is to not have this kind of fighting. And, part of the problem in Syria is, the whole Arab Spring thing started in Tunisia, and then it spread to Egypt. And it was like, well, the Tunisian boss man, he got on an airplane and flew away. No harm, no foul. They actually had a government transition. It functions pretty well right now. It's not perfect, but it functions. And then, Egypt, they had, got rid of Mubarak, and then they had the Muslim Brotherhood, and a lot of turmoil. The whole thing was, but not an all-out war, but street demonstrations and disturbances and general strikes and that sort of thing. And, it ended basically where it began. Mubarak is out, he's been replaced by Sisi, so who's just another military strongman. So you get down to some of these other countries like Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and, Syria. And Syria says, well, my dad had a problem with, Assad, Hafez al-Assad. He was an old-fashioned strong man. he said, I had problems with these guys, the Muslim Brotherhood. And basically, when they gave me trouble, I isolated them in the city, and I shelled the city with artillery, and I killed about 30,000 people, and that solved the problem. So Junior Assad is doing the same thing as dear old dad. And but this time there was a lot more resentment, and he also divided his military. So what was the Free Syrian Army in 2011, 2012 was really Assad's army. Half of it was on Assad's side, the other half of it was on the side that was opposite of Assad. So, you know, right in there should have been like the responsible party saying, look, you know, you guys can't fight, you know, just, you know, we'll work out something. You know, all these people owe somebody something else, you know, some big amount of money. They're, you know, the Russians have had a long-standing relationship with the Syrian government. And, you know, I recall that Putin said, look, you know, we can negotiate something here. This is back in 2012. You know, when there was the whole thing of the Red Line and the poison gas attack in Damascus, they said, we can fix it. You know, let us. And Obama just said, we're not interested. Go away. And, you know, it was an opportunity to be responsible. The United States didn't do its job. It was a failure on the part of everybody in Europe, Russia, and the United States needed, and Saudi Arabia. Those are the powerful countries. Iran, too. These are the responsible countries. They're the ones that should have said, look, we can work out the details, but we can't have the fighting, because the fighting is going to be much more destructive than you can imagine. And, you know, well, particularly in the Iraq War, you know, the Americans have had over and over had chances to be responsible, and every chance it gets, it blows it. So it just blew it again here. Then you get the whole thing with Libya and Gaddafi and Hillary Clinton and arms trafficking and supporting the militant groups here and there. And it's like just absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Well, I think that the methodology, that MO, over the years has been pretty much the same, to use one side against another in order to, again, gain access to the resources. You know, you go back to Smedley Butler's War as a Racket and all the rest of that. And so I think they could just continue. When you talk about responsibility, I don't think any of these nations have ever been responsible. Everybody's always really just looking out for number one. Right. And so they're not, you know, not working together. And, you know, a lot of it's just a show. I mean, the real clown show is going on in Brussels over that, the refugee question. I mean, the 1 week they say, oh, yeah, we got a deal. We're going to trade refugees in Greece for refugees that are in Turkey, and just all sorts of nonsense that's like against the Geneva Convention, and just and plus just impractical. It won't work.
It's not going to work.
It won't work. So, but yet, you know, these people are having caviar dinners and whatnot, and, you know, hobnobbing with each other for photo ops, and you see the big smiles and the handshakes and the hugs and all the rest of it. And they're just spinning their wheels. There's nothing going to happen in Brussels that's going to do jack squat for solving this refugee problem. It's just totally beyond their control at this point. But they got to make a show that they're still in control, and that's what this whole thing is. It's just a show, and it's going on all over the world as it goes up slowly in flames. Not really so slowly if you happen to be in the spot that's in flames, and, you know, you still have people out there who are deniers that this business is spinning down out of control, and that we're, you know, moving on an inexorable path to less, as you like to put it.
Right.
But really, it's a collapse of sort. It's a question of when various tipping points are reached. And just to conclude, to finish up here, you know, I want to get back to a point you brought up earlier, which is very crucial, because you said two kind of contradictory notions. One of them was that at some point we're going to need hard rationing. because, we're moving down this pathway to less. But then you also said that you don't see any point at which production will be less than demand, because demand essentially is going to decrease faster than production. So why would you need hard ration? We'll always, all the way down the ladder, at least in some places, we would have this perceived glut because the demand was decreasing elsewhere. So when does it shrink down to the point that that it's not elsewhere, but it's everywhere that is in deficit? How long can demand be destroyed in other places before it needs to be destroyed in your own place?
When? That's what everybody asks. When?
Of course.
Tell me when, so I can get out.
Yeah, exactly. We need a timeline. Nobody, at least nobody in their right mind, will dispute the fact that you've got this collapse business going underway. But what everybody wants to know at this point is they want some kind of timeline for it.
Well, here's the thing. There's the people that say, well, we're not going to have a collapse. We're not going to have we don't have a shortage because of, then they put in their favorite little thing. Yeah, mostly it's fracking. Of course, we're doing less fracking all the time. So we have to come up with another, magic bullet, why we're not having a shortage. But, they say, look, gas prices all these prices are really low because we have a, massive oversupply. I'm thinking, well, if there's an oversupply, the way to solve that is you turn the valves on the wellheads and, you cut down your flow until you have, if everybody cut 100,000 barrels, then it would end the problem. And
that's why they blame the Saudis for it. They say, well, the Saudis won't reduce their production. And so, the idea is that everybody's supposed to reduce production here. Nobody wants to.
Right now, the countries that aren't reducing, all the countries are reducing production output except for like Iraq and Iran and maybe a couple of others. Saudi Arabia, at least lately, has been, very slow decline from a peak that they've hit a couple of times in the past. About 10 million barrels a day. And they're no doubt going as hard at it as they possibly can. But, if they cut 100,000 barrels a day, and the Russians cut 100,000, the United States cut 100,000, all these countries cut 100,000, or proportionate, then the on-paper glut, the difference between what is sold, what is moved into refineries and what comes out of the ground, that would theoretically, 100,000 barrels a day isn't that much. So we're not talking about unit level. I said theoretically, it would all come into balance and oil prices could, seek a higher level. Okay, the problem is that, as the prices go down, it has a ripple effect. It goes through the rest of the economy. It gets out there into the credit channel, and the credit channel extends from, Frankfurt and Wall Street and London, Tokyo, all the rest of these places in the world, and people are borrowing the money so they can buy these petroleum products, whether it's plastic or gasoline or diesel oil, whatever. So, shortages do not make these people wealthier. So what's happening right now, I'm not 100% sure on this. This is just kind of a theory, a hypothesis. Is what's happening now is that the feedback loop through the credit channel is reducing the customer's ability to afford fuel, regardless of the level of output. So if you reduce the level of output 1 million barrels a day, you're still going to have a glut because you're going to reduce your consumption at the same amount because of the feedback through the credit channel. So eventually you get to the point where the credit channel breaks down because there's too much lending. Right now, all the lending is going to the drillers. So there's money going to the drillers. The drillers have money. They're spending the money trying to keep themselves in business. Basically, they're paying off loans as they come due. They're not really making any more oil. They're just pumping whatever they can right now. And they're hoping to survive. They're hoping that magic happens somewhere and the prices will go back up and they'll take a lot of the pressure off. Now, keep in mind, even $110 a barrel, all these companies were losing money. In fact, all industrial enterprises lose money. They have to be subsidized by credit. But right now they require a lot more credit. and this puts tremendous strain on the credit system. And with money going toward the drillers, there's less money going to the customers. So that's also leaking through the credit channel and affecting the ability of customers to buy fuel. And this is the thing that people don't seem to understand. If you don't have the money, it doesn't matter what you want. You're going to buy less stuff. And that means buy less oil. You may have a car, it may sit in the driveway a few more days per month, but you're driving less. And you take all the other people in the world that drive less, that means there's less demand for fuel. And eventually it feeds back through the credit channel, and it's going to start affecting these lenders. And once the lenders start failing, then you got a problem. That's when you're going to start seeing the demands for rationing, because there's going to be real shortages. Credit generated petroleum output on wholesale.
Yeah, well, and obviously that failing credit system is the key here. It's like your tranny dropping out on your car or whatever, and when that locks up, then the whole thing locks up. So it boils down to when does the credit system break down? And a lot of people perceive that is sort of infinite, that central banks can produce infinite credit and dish it out to whoever they want and so forth, and so that this credit system that they have can go on in perpetuity. That's the general belief of many people.
Their beliefs are not they're not grounded in reality.
Yeah, I don't think so either. All right. Well, I think with that, I think we can tie it up for today. Another good conversation with Steve. I hope you folks out there enjoyed the chat. Us just riffing on a few topics this month, and we'll be back again hopefully next month to discuss what's going on in the world of collapse, in the world of doom, here on the Collapse Cafe. And that's all the doom this time. Until next time, here on the Doomstead Diner. Later.